Greetings to all who's watching our video in the internet, who wants to know more about the situation in Ukraine and the wars that are taking place now. Today we will discuss the question about how does war change a nation and about its future. And I'm pleased to talk with Andriy Kostyuk, the professor of social and ethics at the Ukrainian Catholic University and also the lecturer of the Business School of Ukrainian Catholic University, managing partners of KPLT and the practicing lawyer.
Hello, everybody.
So, dear Andriy, let's start with the question, how does war affect the formation of political nation?
Well, it's obvious that war influences tremendously formation of any nation. If you come to any bigger city, you will see monuments. Most of the monuments will be either for poets. Today we have birthday of our greatest poet, Taras Shevchenko, for example. And another part of monuments will be for kings and for warriors, for generals, for those who won the battles, who overcame the enemies of this concrete nation. So it's obvious that the most dramatic and crucial events in the history of any nation is the war, especially the war with a strong enemy, the war which threatens the existence of the nation. Most of the changes, political changes, for example, borders, established after the end of the war.
How does a nation come to rethink war and look for historical context in its past?
Well, wars are seen very differently from different perspectives. A lot of ideology, a lot of historical, not just rethinking, but historical mythology is around events in the past. For example, the war of Ukrainian Cossacks against Rich Pospolita in 17th century. You will have at least three different stories here. You will have Polish version of this war, you will have Russian, and you will have Ukrainian version of this war. So basically, we have always, any nation thinks this very individually. You never can say it's kind of done and forgotten. It's never forgotten, especially such events when the existence of yourself as a nation, as a political community is at stake.
Can a nation be ready for a war?
I don't think so. A lot of rulers think they are ready. Mr. Putin thought he is ready. Hitler thought he is ready. Napoleon thought he is ready. But I don't think any nation can be really ready for a war in the sense that basically ready for the consequences of war. There are wars which changed the whole structure in the world, like the First and then Second World War. The world which existed before 1914 is completely destroyed in 1920, for example. And then the Second World War, which was in a sense continuation of the first, changed the world once more. Napoleon Wars and French-American revolutions, which were before them, had the same impact. So basically, if anybody before the war would understand and know the real consequences of war, only a mad person would start it. This is why humanity in the last decades thought the war is over, and anything which shall be settled can be settled by means of negotiations and by means of international diplomatic process. Now we see that wars are still with us, and it's a big tragedy of humanity.
When does the realization come that war is inevitable?
Well, if you are attacked, we are in the situation that war is inevitable. We are attacked. The purpose of Russia is to destroy our statehood. Mr. Putin said this a few days ago in his interview, that if Ukraine doesn't give up, it will lose its statehood. So thank you, Mr. Putin for clarifications. We cannot give up, because it means that Ukraine will not exist anymore, which is basically the purpose of him. So in that sense, war is inevitable for us, and it was inevitable to wage war against Hitler, for example, and you can see nice speeches of Mr. Churchill, for example, in 1940. There was a party in UK at that time who thought treaty with Hitler is possible. It's possible to not just to give up. It's possible at that time. This was just a possibility for England, for Great Britain to stop the war, and Hitler didn't want anything from United Kingdom itself, but this would mean that the whole European continent would be occupied by Nazi Germany, and this was unacceptable for democratic forces of civilized world at that time, and England was the only country which waged war against Nazi Germany in 1940, in the second half of 1940. And now we see how right and how brave was the decision of Mr. Churchill, Prime Minister of United Kingdom at that time.
Are there parallels with other countries and nations, and which is the biggest similarity and differences?
Well, I'd like to continue this story of the Second World War and inevitable conflict. Parallels are obvious. There is a nice parallel between Hitler and Putin, for example. A lot of parallels. Ideology of today's Russia is very similar to ideology of Nazi Germany. What we call Russism and Russian world, as they call themselves, is nothing else but Lebensraum of Nazi Germany, the life area, because Mr. Putin imagined that he needs another 40 million of Slavic population, otherwise he cannot control his own territory. They were talking about this for decades already. Nobody has taken this seriously, and it was a mistake. It was a mistake of Europe, it was a mistake of civilized world, because such statements should be taken seriously, and now we see the results of not reacting properly during the last years. And it was the same with Hitler. Everybody remembers 1938 Munich Treaty, when another English Prime Minister, Chamberlain, tried to make a peace treaty with Hitler, and at the end of the day, the situation was just worse, because it was easier to stop Hitler in 1938 than in 1939. The same is with Putin. He could be stopped in 2014 much easier than to stop it now, but unfortunately these parallels come in history many times.
How to realize that the nation must overcome the war by itself without help of other states or associations?
Look, nobody can wage war for you, on behalf of you, without you. So it's, do not kid ourselves. We are, of course, very upset that NATO doesn't react properly, but nobody enters into the war with basically heavy consequences without being compelled to this, yeah? So in this sense, of course, Ukraine has to do the job itself. We understand this. We are doing this. The world is supporting us, and this support will become bigger and bigger, but there could be a world war when some nations fight with some other nations, and it's a big disaster. Our war could be like this in the future. We don't know what will happen tomorrow with all this, but of course nobody, including Ukraine, wishes this to happen. So in that sense, Ukraine has to do the job to defend itself and to defend the civilized world, and we hope that the world will help us to do this.
How did the boundary of humanity change and during the war, and how does this affect the formation of post-war mentality?
After any major war, we have a new order. I was just speaking now with our historian, Dr. Yaroslav Hrycak. We were talking about centuries. Centuries start not just on the first calendar year of the new, like 2001. Centuries in the history start after bigger events, unfortunately, most of the time after wars. So the world order is going to change after this war, I'm confident, because the Ukrainian crisis, as they call it, our war, is basically showing the deficiencies of the world order as it is now. How Russia can be a guarantor of the world order, being a permanent member of Security Council of United Nations, if Russia is one of the biggest aggressors in today's world. And does this constantly. Not just Ukraine, we have Syria, we have Africa, we have different places where Russia provokes turbulences and tries to profit out of this. This is not what the world order has to rely on. After the Second World War, we did have the United Nations. After the First World War, there was a League of Nations. There was a Vienna unity of emperors after the Napoleon Wars. Basically, bigger conflicts and with new world order. I'm sure that our war will basically influence the whole humanity, the whole legal international situation of the world.
How will the political regime of the Ukraine and Russia change, and would it change in the future? In which distance and in which time?
It depends on the consequences of war. If we win, it will be a big shock for the world and a big chance for Ukraine. If we take this chance and use it, there will be for sure a new Marshall Plan for Ukraine as it was for Germany after the Second World War. There will be a lot of interest in Ukraine, cultural, economic, political, and we will be a really prosperous country. If we lose, of course, we will become refugees. Somebody will try to help us, but the governments will think more on how to stop Putin, in a sense, how to make some lasting treaty with him. So in that sense, Ukraine will cease in a short time perspective to be international player. For Russia, it will be the end of Russia anyway, because, the end of Russian Empire. Because now everybody understood that if somebody threatens you with nuclear weapon, you cannot just purchase oil and gas and finance creation of new weapons which will be used against you tomorrow. Everybody understood that there is nobody to talk with, so they can make diplomatic moves if they need, but they will work during next years in order to weaken Russia and to make so that it's not a superpower anymore. Up to denuclearization of Russia, I think, in the future, which would be the best outcome we can have after this war. And for Russian people, Germany is a good country, democratic, economically developed, with nice, friendly people, because it repented after the Second World War. Russia never repented, never recognized atrocities of Soviet regime. most of the crimes against humanity, war crimes, were committed by Soviet Union after the October Revolution. Tens of millions, including Ukrainians and other people of different nations, perished in the 20th century because of Stalin, because of the Communist Party in general. And Russia never said they have something to do with these atrocities. They always denied any possibility that Russia recognizes any guilt. And recognition of guilt, repentance, is start of the renewal, as the German history shows. In that sense, Russia will profit the most from its defeat, because then it will have a chance to become a normal nation at the end of this demilitarization of Russia, which should happen. And of course there will be a big crisis, but after this crisis they have a chance to become human and to join the international community as free nation, not just a threat for the future of the world.
Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to talk with you. And if you want to support Ukrainian army, please follow the link in the description to this video and stand with Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to Ukraine.